Has the universe been guiding you here, whispering through synchronicities and subtle signs that it is time to finally meet your true self? Welcome to Jungian Soul Secrets, the space where psychology and spirituality merge into a living map for transformation. Together we will walk through the doorways of shadow and light, guided by the wisdom of Carl Jung, and uncover the hidden patterns that have kept your soul from its authentic power. If this journey speaks to your heart, I invite you to subscribe and stay with us. Because every step you take inward is a step closer to the life you were born to live. Part 1. The Doorway to the True Self, Empaths and the Call of Individuation. There is a quiet moment when the noise of the world fades and you realize you have been living more in the emotions of others than in your own breath. You feel it when you leave a crowded room, still carrying fragments of everyone else's stories, like water clinging to your skin after swimming in a river. You sit alone and notice a strange emptiness, not because you are without feeling, but because your own feelings have been drowned by the waves you absorbed. This is the paradox of the empathic soul, and Carl Jung knew it well. He called the path back to your self-individuation, the return to the center of your being, the journey of becoming whole. Every empath knows the exhaustion of carrying burdens that do not belong to them. A friend's anxiety lingers in your chest. A coworker's anger sits in your stomach. Your family's unspoken tension hums at the back of your mind. At first it feels noble, even spiritual, to absorb these storms as if by shouldering them you bring peace to the world. Yet slowly, without realizing, you lose the ability to tell where the river of your soul begins and where the rivers of others end. Jung observed this deeply, warning that a life lived only in service of other people's emotions risks abandoning the authentic self. He wrote that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it directs your life and you call it fate. But what happens when your unconscious is crowded with the voices of everyone you have ever tried to soothe? The answer lies in what Jung called the shadow. For the empath, the shadow is not only anger or envy, it is the secret desire to be needed, the hidden satisfaction of being the one who heals, the fear of being invisible when no one requires saving. These truths are difficult to admit because they crack the polished mirror of the healer identity. Yet Jung taught that one does not become enlightened by imagining light, but by making darkness conscious. To find your true self, you must walk through the doorway of your shadow, even if it means confronting the parts of you that thrive on being the savior. Imagine a woman named Sarah who for years has been the refuge of her friends. Whenever someone breaks down, Sarah listens, absorbs, comforts, and carries their pain. She believes this makes her spiritual, compassionate, evolved. But one night, she notices the silence when no one calls. She feels restless, empty, almost irrelevant. This is her shadow revealing itself, whispering that her identity has been built on being the healer rather than being herself. Jung would say that Sarah is trapped in her persona, the mask she wears to appear endlessly supportive. The tragedy is not that she feels too much, but that she has lost the right to feel herself. The transformation begins when Sarah chooses to step back and ask, what is truly mine to carry, and what belongs to others? This question is the key to unlocking individuation. It is the mirror placed before the soul, showing both shadow and light. Jung emphasized that individuation is not about rejecting sensitivity, but about integrating it. The empath must learn to distinguish compassion from codependency, intuition from hypervigilance, presence from possession. This is the map he left us, a psychological compass pointing back to authenticity. When the empath starts to honor their own voice, something shifts. The endless flood of emotions begins to separate like waters finding their own streams. A new clarity arises, a peace that feels both strong and soft, like light entering a darkened room. This is elevation, The moment you realize you can love without losing yourself, you can support without absorbing, you can shine without burning out. Jung described this as the birth of the self, the true center that holds both shadow and light, vulnerability and strength. There is a golden truth that emerges here, simple yet unforgettable. You are not broken, you are not weak, you are becoming. So I ask you, when was the last time you paused and asked, whose emotion am I really carrying right now? What happens if you place it down, even for a moment, and listen to the whisper of your own soul? Can you see the doorway opening when you choose yourself first? When one empath awakens to their authenticity, it becomes a ripple in the collective river. Others feel it, others remember. By choosing to stand in your truth, you give silent permission for others to do the same. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, the shared inheritance of humanity. Your healing is not only personal, it is communal. Each time you reclaim your own center, you light a torch in the dark for someone else still lost in the storm. And so we close this first step together with gratitude. If these words stir something in you, hold it gently, let it grow. Share this journey with others who need it, because none of us walk this path alone. You are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth. Part 2. The mirror of exhaustion. Why empaths lose themselves in others. The river of life carries us all forward, but for the empath, it often feels like standing in the middle of the current while holding everyone else's weight. Every rushing emotion of those around you pulls at your body, and you can barely keep your own feet planted on the riverbed. In this struggle, Carl Jung saw a profound truth. He knew that the empathic soul is both blessed and burdened, capable of sensing the depths of human feeling, yet constantly at risk of losing itself in the flood. To begin finding your true self, you must first acknowledge the pain of living in this fragile state. The pain is real. Society expects you to always be available, always kind, always strong enough to take on the worries of others. Friends lean on you. Colleagues confide in you. Family members look to you for comfort. At first, you may take pride in this role, but slowly it drains you. You go to bed feeling heavy, wake up already tired, and move through the day with emotions that are not truly your own. Jung would say that this is a dangerous way to live because the unconscious grows stronger when ignored. The unacknowledged parts of yourself begin to protest in silence, and the more you deny them, the louder they become. Here lies the shadow. For the empath, the shadow is not only anger or fear, but the hidden compulsion to be needed at all times. Deep within, there is a voice whispering that your value lies in being the healer, the caretaker, the savior. But this voice is a mask. Jung called it the persona, the role we perform for others while our authentic self remains buried. The empath's persona is polished with sacrifice and held together by martyrdom. Yet behind it, a storm brews. Suppressed anger at being taken for granted, sadness for never being seen, fear of who you might be without this mask. The shadow demands to be known, and until it is brought to light, it will continue to sabotage your inner peace. Imagine a man named Daniel who has lived his life as the strong shoulder for everyone around him. When his sister goes through heartbreak, he listens endlessly. When his co-workers fight, he smooths the edges. He believes he is doing good, but in the quiet hours of the night, Daniel feels invisible. He wonders who would care for him if he stopped caring for others. One evening, as he looks into the mirror, he does not recognize the face staring back. It is as if he has lived as a reflection of everyone else's needs, never once pausing to meet his own. Jung would say Daniel has become trapped in emotional fusion, unable to distinguish between the river of his soul and the torrents of others. The doorway to transformation appears the moment Daniel decides to set a boundary. It may be as small as saying no to a request or choosing to spend time alone without guilt. Each act is a step across the threshold into authenticity. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the shadow rather than rejecting it. The empath does not need to abandon their gift of sensitivity, but to learn how to carry it consciously with awareness and choice. This is the map to the true self, the chart that leads back to center. Once the first step is taken, a light begins to shine where only darkness once lingered. Clarity emerges like sunlight breaking through the trees of a dense forest. The empath begins to see that compassion without boundaries is not true compassion, but self-erasure. By holding firm to their own center, they can give more authentically because they are no longer giving from emptiness. Jung described this as the birth of the self, when the fragmented parts of the psyche are gathered together and united. This moment is liberation, when the empath finally learns that love does not mean losing oneself. There is a golden truth here. To heal others, you must first refuse to abandon yourself. So let me ask you, how often have you mistaken exhaustion for compassion? How many times have you ignored your own heart because you feared disappointing someone else? And what would it mean to finally honor your own voice, to open the doorway inward rather than outward? When you begin to choose yourself, the ripple extends far beyond you. Every empath who steps into their authenticity becomes a signal to the collective unconscious, what Jung described as humanity's shared inner world. Your healing is not selfish, it is a contribution. By breaking free from emotional fusion, you model a new way of being, one that allows others to see that sensitivity can be paired with strength and compassion with self-respect. And so in this part of the journey, we pause to remember that the mirror is always before us. Each face we seek to heal is a reflection of our own unacknowledged wounds, and each step into authenticity is a gift not only to ourselves but to the community of souls walking beside us. You are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth. Part 3. Facing the shadow, the hidden rage and the need to be needed. There is a quiet doorway within every empath, a threshold between the familiar exhaustion of absorbing others and the unknown clarity of being oneself. Carl Jung called this threshold the encounter with the shadow, and for the sensitive soul it is the most difficult yet most necessary step toward authenticity. Many people fear their shadows, but for the empath, the fear is multiplied. Not only do you carry your own disowned emotions, but you also carry the projections of countless others. The unconscious becomes a crowded house, and unless you make space to see what truly belongs to you, the weight becomes unbearable. The reality of living as an empath often feels like walking through a hall of mirrors. Each person reflects something different back at you, and you mistake their reflection for your own. One friend's sadness lingers in your chest. A partner's anger vibrates in your voice. A stranger's despair leaves you restless at night. Slowly, your authentic face disappears behind the layers of these borrowed reflections. Jung taught that until we confront the parts of ourselves we have denied, we will continue to live as shadows of others. The empath cannot find wholeness by carrying everyone else's fragments. Wholeness begins by gathering the lost fragments of one's own soul. Hidden beneath the surface of the empath's compassion is often a silent rage. Rage at having your boundaries violated again and again. Rage at being unseen for who you really are. Rage at the endless demand to give without receiving. Because society tells you that anger is not spiritual, you push it into the unconscious. But unacknowledged anger does not vanish. It transforms into resentment, passive aggression, or self-sacrifice that secretly hopes for recognition. Jung called this emotional possession, when the unconscious seizes control because the conscious self refuses to claim it. The empath must step into the mirror and admit, yes, I am angry, yes, I have needs, yes, I am more than the caretaker I pretend to be. Consider the story of Maria, a teacher loved by her students for her kindness and patience. Every day she carries their worries, their fears, their family troubles. Her colleagues admire her dedication, and parents praise her selflessness. But inside, Maria feels invisible. She has dreams she never voices, pain she never shares, and boundaries she never sets. One evening, she finds herself shouting at her partner over something trivial. She is shocked at the intensity of her outburst, as if another person has taken control. Jung would explain that Maria's shadow has surfaced, demanding recognition after years of silence. The anger is not her enemy but a messenger. It calls her to reclaim her right to feel, to express, to exist beyond the mask of the healer. The key to transformation lies in courage. To turn toward the shadow is to walk through the doorway of fear into the room of truth. Jung insisted that the shadow, once made conscious, becomes a source of authentic power. For the empath, this means admitting the hidden desire to be needed, the fear of being ordinary, the longing to be seen not as a savior but as a human being. These truths do not diminish the empath's gift. Instead, they cleanse it of unconscious motives, allowing sensitivity to become a conscious choice rather than a compulsion. When the shadow is embraced, the empath begins to experience freedom. No longer enslaved by the need to rescue, they can offer support from wholeness rather than woundedness. The river that once carried the pain of others now flows with clarity, reflecting the sky of their own soul. Jung described this as the transcendent function, the moment when opposites are held together without destroying each other. The empath can be compassionate without self-erasure, strong without hardness, open without being porous. This is elevation, the rising above unconscious patterns into conscious presence. From this higher view, a golden insight emerges. You cannot heal by abandoning yourself. You heal by returning to yourself. So I ask you, what emotions have you buried because they seemed unworthy of your identity as the sensitive one? What needs have you silenced because you feared being selfish? And what would happen if you opened the doorway inward and let these forgotten voices speak? When one empath chooses to listen to their own shadow, the effect spreads outward. Jung taught that the collective unconscious binds us all, and each personal awakening adds to the greater awakening of humanity. By reclaiming your shadow, you give others silent permission to face theirs. By standing in your truth, you offer a mirror of courage to those still hiding behind masks. The journey of the empathic soul is not about rejecting sensitivity. It is about claiming it fully, shadow and light, until you no longer serve from compulsion but from authenticity. And so we arrive at the end of this chapter with a reminder that will echo through every part of this journey. You are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth. Part 4. The archetypal trap, when empaths are possessed by collective patterns. To walk further into the inner landscape is to begin understanding how Carl Jung's map of the psyche applies to the empathic soul. Jung believed that every human being carries not only a personal unconscious but also a collective unconscious, a reservoir of archetypes and patterns that shape how we live and relate. For the empath, this reality becomes even more vivid because your sensitivity does not stop at personal interactions. You feel archetypal energies moving through people and situations, and without awareness, you can be swept away by them like a leaf in a river. This is why Jung's knowledge is essential. He did not only describe the shadow and the persona, he revealed how to navigate the unseen territory of the unconscious with clarity and purpose. Imagine the empath as someone standing before a vast doorway. On one side is the conscious world filled with duties, relationships, and responsibilities. On the other side is the unconscious, where symbols, dreams, and archetypes wait. Most people glance at this doorway occasionally but keep their distance. The empath, however, lives close to it. Sensitivity makes you aware of every draft of wind that escapes through its cracks. When someone activates the victim archetype near you, you feel pulled into the savior archetype without choice. When someone embodies aggression, you are unconsciously thrown into the role of peacemaker. Jung called this state participation mystique, where the boundary between self and other dissolves and you are no longer acting consciously but as an instrument of collective forces. This is not weakness. It is evidence of how deeply you are connected to the web of life. But without awareness, the connection enslaves rather than liberates. Jung insisted that individuation requires bringing these unconscious dynamics into consciousness. For the empath, this means noticing when you are being pulled by archetypes, when your actions feel compulsory rather than chosen. It means pausing to ask, am I truly responding from my own center? Or am I being carried by the tide of a collective pattern? This moment of recognition is the turning point, the mirror that allows you to separate your own face from the masks of archetypes. Consider the story of Elijah, a young man who always became the rescuer in his friendships. Whenever someone felt lost, he was the first to show up. He believed this was pure compassion, but Jung would say Elijah was unconsciously possessed by the savior archetype. His friend's struggles activated something in him that was larger than his personal will. Over time, Elijah noticed a pattern. He felt drained, resentful, and invisible whenever his efforts went unacknowledged. One night, he dreamed of carrying a heavy figure on his back through a river. The figure grew heavier until Elijah collapsed in the water. This dream was not random. Jung taught that dreams are the small hidden doors into the soul. Elijah's unconscious was speaking, showing him that his savior role was drowning his true self. By recognizing this, Elijah began to withdraw from compulsive rescuing and instead chose to offer support only when it felt aligned with his own center. This is the beginning of what Jung called active imagination, the practice of dialoguing with unconscious images rather than being ruled by them. For the empath, active imagination becomes a lifeline. Instead of absorbing every storm, you can enter into conversation with the images, feelings, and patterns that arise. You can ask the shadow why it is angry, ask the archetype why it appears, and allow the answer to reveal your next step. Through this practice, you transform from an unconscious participant into a conscious co-creator of your inner life. The transformation is profound. When you start recognizing archetypal possession, you begin to reclaim your power. The river no longer sweeps you away. You learn to stand in its current with grounded feet, watching the water flow without losing yourself to it. Jung described this as the development of psychological sovereignty. It is the ability to feel deeply, to sense collective energies, but also to remain rooted in the truth of your authentic self. This sovereignty is not cold detachment. It is warm presence, the ability to care without collapsing, to support without being consumed. At this stage of the journey, a golden realization emerges. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is your teacher. So reflect for a moment. Have you noticed times when you seem to step into roles without choosing them? Have you felt yourself pulled into drama you never wanted? Have you seen patterns repeat in your relationships that feel larger than life? Each of these moments is an invitation from the unconscious, a doorway asking you to walk through with awareness. When you begin to do this, your growth becomes a gift not only to yourself but to the collective. Jung believed that every individual who integrates their unconscious contributes to the healing of humanity. For the empath, this contribution is magnified. By learning to stand in your sovereignty, you stop unconsciously amplifying collective chaos. You become a stabilizing presence, a mirror of clarity in a world of distorted reflections. This is why the journey matters. The empathic soul is not here to drown in the river of collective pain, but to transform sensitivity into wisdom. You are called to be a lighthouse, not a sponge. Jung's map shows that true compassion flows not from sacrifice but from integration. And when you embody this truth, you remind others of their own capacity to face the unconscious with courage. As this part of the journey closes, remember that every dream, every symbol, every shadow that rises is part of the great dialogue between your conscious self and the deeper soul. Do not turn away from it. Walk through the doorway, meet what waits for you inside. For in doing so, you discover that your sensitivity is not a curse, but a bridge. You are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth. Part 5. The collapse of the persona. When the mask of the healer breaks, every journey of transformation eventually comes to a decisive moment. A moment when the heart realizes it can no longer continue in the same old patterns. For the empath, this moment often arrives quietly but forcefully, like a mirror suddenly shattering to reveal a hidden doorway behind it. Jung believed that these crises are not accidents but invitations. They are the soul's way of saying that the false self has reached its limit and that the time has come for authenticity. To the empath, this invitation may feel terrifying because it demands the release of the role that has provided both purpose and identity. Yet this very release is the key to freedom. The empathic soul spends years performing a kind of emotional theater. You enter rooms and immediately sense the temperature of others' feelings. You adjust your energy, soothe tensions, absorb anger, brighten sadness. It is as if you are playing the role of the perfect caretaker in an endless play. This performance is the persona that Jung described, the mask you wear to meet the world's expectations. But as Jung warned, the stronger the persona, the more deeply the authentic self retreats into shadow. At some point, the mask begins to suffocate. You find yourself smiling while exhausted, giving while empty, speaking kindness while feeling invisible. This contradiction cannot last forever. The soul demands truth. Consider the story of Leah, a nurse who devoted herself to her patients, her colleagues, and her family. Everyone admired her compassion. Yet behind her gentle smile she felt hollow. She rarely spoke of her own struggles, fearing that doing so would diminish her role as the strong one. One night, after a particularly draining day, she sat in her car and could not bring herself to turn the key in the ignition. Tears streamed down her face, not because of the patients she had helped, but because she suddenly realized she did not know who she was outside of helping. Jung would say Leah was at the threshold of individuation. The persona had collapsed and the authentic self was calling to be born. The transformation begins here in the willingness to step back from performance and ask, who am I without the mask? Jung insisted that individuation requires conscious separation, the ability to distinguish what belongs to you from what belongs to others. For the empath, this separation is both painful and liberating. Painful because it feels like betraying the identity you have carefully built. Liberating because it opens the doorway to your own authentic needs, desires, and voice. This is the first glimpse of the true self, the part of you that has been hidden but never destroyed. As the empath begins to honor this self, a new energy emerges. The exhaustion that once dominated begins to lift. The silence that once felt empty now feels spacious. You discover that you can hold space for others without disappearing into them. You can feel compassion without losing your boundaries. Jung described this as the birth of the self, the center of wholeness that integrates shadow and persona, light and darkness. It is not the destruction of sensitivity, but its refinement. Sensitivity becomes a choice rather than a compulsion, an act of strength rather than sacrifice. From this place, clarity rises like dawn. You realize that your worth does not depend on how many people you rescue or how much pain you absorb. Your worth lies in being authentically you, in living from the center rather than the periphery. This realization is not a distant ideal but a lived experience, felt in the quiet confidence of saying no without guilt, of resting without apology, of speaking truth without fear. Jung would call this the integration of opposites, the holding together of vulnerability and strength, openness and boundaries, compassion and self-respect. And here a golden truth emerges. To choose yourself is not selfishness, it is the foundation of love. So let me ask you, how often have you mistaken martyrdom for compassion? How many times have you ignored your own exhaustion because you feared being seen as weak? And what might happen if you began to live not as a reflection of others, but as the mirror of your own truth? This personal awakening is not isolated. Jung taught that when one person integrates their unconscious, it ripples through the collective unconscious. Your transformation becomes a quiet offering to humanity. By breaking the cycle of self-erasure, you show others that it is possible to live with both sensitivity and sovereignty. You become a living example that boundaries do not diminish love, they strengthen it. You remind the world that true empathy begins with authenticity. This is the deeper meaning of Jung's map for the empathic soul. It is not a call to abandon your gift, but to elevate it, to step beyond unconscious absorption into conscious presence, to transform from an emotional sponge into a lighthouse, steady and luminous, guiding others without losing yourself. The river of life will continue to flow, but now you stand firmly on your own ground, choosing when and how to enter the water. As we close this chapter, let us remember that every act of authenticity is a step into liberation. Every boundary honored is a doorway to truth. Every shadow integrated is a light reclaimed. You are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth. Part 6. Elevation through synchronicity. Signs the universe guides the empath. When the empath has begun to touch the edges of authenticity, another stage of the journey begins, a stage Jung would describe as elevation. This is not the fragile uplift of denial or false positivity, but the deeper liberation that arises when shadow and light are embraced as parts of one whole. Elevation is the rising of the soul after it has walked through its own darkness. For the empath, it is the moment when sensitivity becomes a gift rather than a prison, when the river of emotions no longer drowns but nourishes. At this point in the path, the empath begins to experience synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that Jung described as messages from the unconscious and from the universe itself. You start to notice patterns that seem to guide you forward. A book appears in your hands just when you need its wisdom. A stranger's words echo exactly what your heart has been wrestling with. An opportunity aligns with the boundary you have just set. These are not random. Jung believed synchronicities are signs that the conscious and unconscious are working together, that you are stepping into alignment with the self. For the empath, this is evidence that choosing authenticity is not isolation, but communion with a larger order. Imagine Olivia, who had spent years sacrificing her well-being for others. After beginning to set boundaries, she felt terrified that she would lose everyone's love. Yet in the weeks that followed, she began meeting new people who respected her limits and valued her voice. One afternoon, she saw a butterfly land on her windowsill just as she was journaling about transformation. The sight brought tears to her eyes, for it felt like a direct message from the universe. You are changing, and you are safe. Jung would say Olivia was experiencing the transcendent function, when the psyche resolves its opposites into a higher synthesis, and synchronicity confirms that the path is true. Elevation is not about floating above life. It is about seeing with new eyes. The empath who once felt enslaved by others' pain begins to feel clarity, as if the fog has lifted. You realize that compassion does not mean carrying every burden. It means shining light so others may find their own strength. You recognize that your task is not to erase the darkness of others, but to stand beside them with your own flame intact. In this way, you become not an emotional sponge, but a mirror and a lighthouse. This is the elevation of empathy into conscious service. With elevation comes peace. The battles you once fought in silence, the war between pleasing others and honoring yourself, begin to soften. You see that you can hold both vulnerability and strength, both openness and boundary, both love and discernment. This is the paradox that Jung insisted was central to individuation: to hold the tension of opposites until a higher truth is born. The empath who once dissolved in the chaos of others now stands rooted, offering presence without erasure. This peace is not fragile. It is the calm of the river that has found its course. From this higher ground, a golden truth arises. The more you choose yourself, the more you are able to love others authentically. So reflect now. What moments in your life have felt like synchronicity, as if the universe was whispering directly to you? Can you recall a time when the right person, symbol, or sign appeared just as you were making an inner shift? And how might your life change if you began to see these not as coincidences, but as mirrors of your alignment with the self? As this awareness deepens, your journey becomes more than personal. Jung wrote that each person's individuation contributes to the collective. When an empath rises into authenticity, they lift others simply by being who they are. Your presence becomes medicine. Your peace becomes guidance. Your boundaries become examples. You expand the community of souls who are learning to live from truth rather than compulsion. This is the collective awakening, the ripple that spreads from one life into many. Elevation is not the end of the journey, but it is a glimpse of the destination. It is the reminder that the universe supports you when you step into alignment with your authentic self. It is the assurance that sensitivity, once integrated, becomes a source of strength. It is the clarity that your soul has always been guiding you home. And so, as we pause here, remember that every synchronicity is a message. Every boundary honored is an act of love. Every step into authenticity is a rising. You are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth. Part 7. Golden Truths, Words that Free the Empathic Soul. There comes a point in the journey of every empath when words begin to carve themselves into the soul. Jung often reminded us that transformation does not come from accumulating ideas, but from embodying truths that pierce through illusion. This is where the golden quote, the poetic truth, emerges like a flame in the night. For the empath who has spent years wandering through shadows of others' emotions, these words can serve as anchors. They remind you that the power you seek is not somewhere outside of you, but already waiting in the silence within. The empath's life often feels like a pendulum swinging between two extremes. On one side is the exhaustion of giving without end, and on the other side is the guilt that comes when you finally try to step back. Neither side offers peace. Jung would say that this is the tension of opposites, and peace is only found when you learn to hold both poles without collapsing into either. The golden truth that arises here is simple yet profound. Wholeness is not perfection but integration. You are not asked to erase your sensitivity nor to abandon your shadow. You are asked to carry both into the light of awareness. Picture Samuel, a musician whose life was dedicated to writing songs for others. Every lyric, every melody was shaped to comfort friends or uplift listeners. Yet one day he realized he had never written a song for himself. His music was a mirror reflecting everyone else's stories, but never his own. In despair, he set down his guitar and considered quitting altogether. Then a line came to him, clear and luminous. I am not what I give away, I am what remains when the giving stops. This single sentence changed the course of his life. He began to write for himself, to play the music that expressed his own show and light. To his surprise, those songs touched others even more deeply because they came from authenticity rather than performance. Jung would recognize this as the emergence of the self, revealed through a golden phrase that captured the truth of Samuel's soul. These golden insights arrived not as intellectual conclusions, but as revelations, as if whispered by the unconscious at the moment you are ready to hear them. They are the sentences that echo in your heart when you wake at dawn, the words that surface in meditation, the truths that strike you as you walk along a quiet riverbank. Jung described them as the fruit of the transcendent function, the synthesis that emerges when the conscious and unconscious finally meet in dialogue. For the empath, such words become more than inspiration. They are lifelines reminding you to return again and again to the center of your own being. Elevation through golden truth transforms the way you see yourself and others. No longer do you need to measure your worth by the weight you carry. No longer do you confuse silence with emptiness. You begin to see that your soul speaks in whispers. And these whispers are enough. The mirror that once showed you only the faces of others now begins to reflect your own. You realize that authenticity is not a luxury but the essence of who you are. A golden truth emerges here. You are not here to drown in the storms of others. You are here to remember the stillness of your own sky. Let me ask you directly, what are the sentences that have stayed with you throughout your life? Which words felt like doorways opening in your heart? Can you recall a moment when a phrase, a line, a dream, or even a stranger's comment echoed so deeply that you knew it was meant for you? These are not accidents. They are mirrors guiding you toward the self you have always been. When you embrace these golden truths, you offer them back to the collective. Jung believed that each of us is both individual and universal, and what awakens in you contributes to the awakening of humanity. When you carry a truth like a torch, you illuminate the path for others who are still wandering in the dark. The empath's words, once weighed down by exhaustion, now become instruments of clarity. They ripple outward, healing not by absorption but by resonance. Others hear your truth and recognize their own. This is how community grows, not through sacrifice but through shared authenticity. As this part of the journey closes, remember that the words you live by shape the world you create. Hold on to the sentences that set you free. Speak them, write them, breathe them into your days. They are the golden keys that unlock the doorway to the self. And always remember, you are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth. Part 8. The power of reflection, asking the questions that awaken you. Reflection is the moment when the river slows, when the rushing current of external demands finally allows the surface to become still enough to see your own face. For the empath, this stage is not a luxury but a necessity. Jung believed that the unconscious reveals itself through symbols, dreams, and quiet intuitions. Yet most of us are too busy living in the noise of others to ever hear it. Reflection is the act of opening the mirror inward, of asking the questions that pierce the mask and awaken the soul. The empath who has lived for years as a caretaker often struggles to pause. Silence feels unnatural, as though something important is being neglected. But the truth is that without reflection, your entire life can become a performance in service of others, while your own essence remains hidden in the shadow. Jung wrote that the foundation of all growth is consciousness, and consciousness begins with noticing. Reflection is noticing. It is asking what truly belongs to me and what I have carried for others. It is asking what emotions I have buried beneath the mask of kindness. It is asking whether the life I live is a reflection of my authentic self or a role I learned to perform. Consider Hannah, who spent her childhood being praised for being the quiet, helpful, and sensitive daughter. As an adult, she continued this pattern, always listening, always absorbing, always putting others before herself. One afternoon, exhausted and alone, she sat beside a lake. For the first time in years, she allowed the silence to hold her. The reflection of the trees on the water stirred something within her, and she asked herself, what if I stopped playing this role? What if I gave my own heart a voice? That question was the seed of her transformation. Jung would say Hannah had begun the practice of self-reflection, a dialogue with her unconscious that would guide her toward individuation. Reflection is not about finding quick answers. It is about opening the doorway to deeper questions. What parts of myself do I fear others will reject? What longings have I silenced because they did not fit the image of being spiritual, kind, or strong? What truth have I avoided because it might disrupt the comfort of others? These questions are rivers that flow into the ocean of the self. They invite you to turn inward rather than outward, to choose the difficult honesty of authenticity over the ease of performance. As reflection deepens, clarity arises. You begin to notice the subtle difference between empathy and absorption. You sense when you are acting from genuine compassion and when you are driven by fear of being unworthy. You realize that silence is not emptiness but a fertile space where your authentic self can speak. Jung called this inner dialogue active imagination, the practice of allowing unconscious material to express itself. For the empath, this becomes a sacred mirror, revealing not only what has been hidden but also what is possible. From this process comes a golden realization. Reflection is not retreat, it is return. It is the way back to yourself. So pause and ask yourself now. When was the last time you truly listened to your own feelings without judging them? What emotions have you pushed aside because they felt inconvenient or unspiritual? And what might happen if you gave yourself permission to be seen not only by others but by your own soul? The practice of reflection does not only serve you, it also serves the collective. Jung emphasized that self-knowledge ripples outward into the larger human community. When you reflect honestly, you break cycles of projection. You stop unconsciously casting your shadow onto others and begin to own it as your own. This creates healthier relationships and more authentic connections. By reflecting inward, you strengthen the mirror you hold for others, allowing them to see themselves with greater clarity. For the empathic soul, reflection is not optional. It is the breath that sustains the journey. Without it, you remain trapped in the endless cycle of giving without being. With it, you step into the doorway of individuation, guided not by the chaos of others but by the quiet compass of your own self. And so as this chapter closes, remember to pause. Sit by the river. Look into the mirror. Ask the questions that scare you. For in those questions lies the key to your freedom. You are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth. Part 9. From Self to Collective. How Empathic Healing Transforms Humanity. When the empath begins to reclaim the fragments of their soul, a new awareness dawns. This journey is not only about the self, it is about the collective. Jung taught that the process of individuation is never isolated. Each person who integrates their shadow contributes to the wholeness of humanity. For the empath, who has always felt deeply connected to others, this realization carries profound meaning. Your healing is not simply your own. It is a light placed in the center of the community, radiating outward and guiding others who may still be lost in the fog of unconsciousness. Empaths often spend years feeling as though their sensitivity is a burden, a secret weight that isolates them from the rest of the world. But when sensitivity is integrated, it becomes a bridge. You begin to see that your ability to sense the unspoken is not meant to drown you, but to awaken others through your presence. Jung described the collective unconscious as the shared inheritance of humanity, filled with archetypes and patterns that we all experience. When you begin to heal, you shift not only your personal story, but also these collective patterns. You become a doorway through which new possibilities can enter the world. Imagine Michael, who once lived in constant exhaustion from carrying the emotions of everyone around him. After learning to set boundaries and honor his authentic self, he began to notice something extraordinary. His friends no longer came to him only to unload their pain. Instead, they came because they felt inspired by his presence. They saw that he was living with clarity, and they wanted to learn how to do the same. Without lecturing or forcing, Michael became a catalyst for transformation simply by embodying his own authenticity. Jung would say that Michael had moved from unconscious empathy to conscious community, where the individual's growth feeds the awakening of the collective. The empath who integrates their shadow becomes a living mirror for others. Instead of reflecting back psyche, you reflect back wholeness. Instead of amplifying pain, you amplify possibility. This does not mean you must become a guru or a healer in the conventional sense. It means that your authentic presence naturally teaches, naturally heals, naturally uplifts. Jung often emphasized that the greatest gift you can give the world is to become who you truly are. For the empath, this truth is even more vital, because your authenticity ripples outward in powerful ways. From this awareness arises a golden truth. Your healing is the world's healing. So ask yourself now, how might your growth inspire those around you? What would happen if you stopped hiding your authentic self out of fear of rejection? And what kind of community could emerge if more empaths chose integration over absorption? These questions are not abstract. They are seeds that, when nurtured, grow into collective transformation. As empaths awaken, they begin to recognize one another. A silent community forms, bound not by roles of savior and victim, but by shared authenticity. You realize that you are not alone in your journey, that others are walking beside you, facing their own shadows, choosing their own boundaries. This sense of connection is powerful. It reminds you that the river you once felt lost in is not a flood meant to drown you, but a living current carrying many souls toward awakening. Jung would call this the expansion of consciousness, where the individual recognizes their role in the greater whole. Community expansion does not mean merging into others again. It means contributing your authentic self to the collective without losing your sovereignty. You can love without dissolving, guide without absorbing, connect without erasing. In this way, you become part of a network of conscious empaths, each shining their own light, each strengthening the whole. Together, these lights create a constellation of truth across the human experience, reminding everyone that individuation is not only personal, but universal. As we close this chapter, remember that the path you walk is never just yours. Every boundary you set, every shadow you integrate, every truth you embody sends ripples into the collective unconscious. You are not only healing yourself, you are helping to heal the soul of the world. You are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth. Part 10. Wholeness, not perfection. The rebirth of the conscious empath. Every journey must arrive at a threshold where the path traveled and the horizon ahead meet in a moment of recognition. For the empath, this final stage of the map is not an ending, but a rebirth, a gentle but powerful realization that you have always carried within you what you were seeking. Jung often reminded us that individuation is not about perfection or arrival, but about becoming whole. To find your true self as an empath is to live with both shadow and light, both strength and tenderness, both solitude and connection, in balance rather than conflict. The empath who once drowned in the emotions of others now stands by the river with a steady gaze. The waters still flow, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm, but you are no longer swept away. Instead, you choose when to step into the current, how long to remain, and when to step back onto the shore. This choice is the essence of freedom. Jung described it as the emergence of the self, the center of the psyche that integrates every fragment of your being. No part is rejected, no voice silenced. All is embraced in the wholeness of who you are. Consider Maya, who for years lived as a mirror for everyone else's needs. She entered this journey exhausted, fragmented, and lost in the shadow of her own silence. Through confronting her hidden fears, acknowledging her shadow, and honoring her authentic voice, she discovered something profound. She no longer feared saying no longer equated love with sacrifice, no longer mistook emptiness for compassion. In living this truth, she noticed her relationships transformed. Friends who once drained her now respected her boundaries. Opportunities that once eluded her appeared naturally. Maya became not only herself, but also a light for others. Jung would say she had crossed the doorway from unconscious living into conscious individuation. The empath who embraces this final stage discovers a peace that is not fragile but rooted. It is the peace of knowing that your worth is not tied to saving others, that your gift does not require your disappearance, that your sensitivity is a strength rather than a weakness. You can love without losing yourself. You can serve without self-erasure. You can stand in your truth while still offering presence to the world. This is the transformation of empathy into wisdom, the alchemy of turning shadow into light. At this culmination, a golden truth shines. You are not here to escape yourself. You are here to embody yourself fully. So reflect one last time. What masks are you still holding on to? What parts of your shadow still wait to be welcomed? What truth are you still afraid to speak? And how would your life change if you chose, in this very moment, to step through the doorway and claim the fullness of who you are? This final step is also a beginning. As Jung emphasized, individuation is not a straight line but a spiral. You will encounter these patterns again: shadow, persona, boundary, compassion. But each time at a deeper level of awareness. Each cycle brings greater clarity, greater authenticity, greater freedom. The empath's journey is not about escaping sensitivity, but about transforming it into a conscious gift. And in doing so, you expand not only your own life, but the life of the collective. When you choose yourself, you give others permission to do the same. When you hold your boundaries, you teach others that love and respect can coexist. When you shine your authentic light, you remind the world that sensitivity is strength. This is how your personal transformation ripples outward into humanity. You are no longer just an individual empath surviving in isolation. You are part of a constellation of conscious souls awakening together. And so, as we close this map, remember that the universe has guided you here for a reason. The signs, the synchronicities, the inner whispers have brought you to this moment so you could finally see yourself clearly. Hold this truth gently but firmly. You are not broken, you are becoming. You are not weak, you are awakening. You are not alone, for the universe mirrors your truth. As we arrive at the end of this journey, pause for a moment and notice what has shifted within you. Jung taught that the task of life is not to become perfect, but to become whole. For the empath, this means no longer scattering yourself in the storms of others, no longer silencing your own truth, but standing firmly at the center of your being. The shadow has been faced, the masks have been laid down, and what remains is not emptiness, but the radiant presence of your authentic self. You have walked through darkness and discovered light. You have faced the mirror and recognized both the wounds and the wisdom it holds. You have seen that the river of life does not need to drown you, for you have learned how to flow with it consciously. This is the gift of individuation. This is the transformation of sensitivity into strength, of vulnerability into wisdom, of empathy into conscious love. Remember this truth. Your healing matters not only for yourself, but for the collective. Each boundary you set, each truth you honor, each moment you choose authenticity becomes a ripple in the great ocean of humanity. You are not alone in this work. Every empath who awakens adds their light to a constellation that guides us all toward a more compassionate and conscious world. As you carry these insights into your life, know that you are part of a growing community. Here, within Jungian Soul Secrets, we continue to explore the mysteries of the unconscious, the beauty of transformation, and the courage of becoming who we truly are. If this journey has resonated with you, I warmly invite you to subscribe, to share your reflections, and to stay connected. Together we are weaving a tapestry of souls committed to authenticity, compassion, and awakening. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not alone. The universe mirrors your truth,